So the federal workforce is being remade into something completely different. And recently, the head of OPM, the Office of Personnel Management, Scott, he sat down for an interview and he gave some surprising answers. I want to go through that to give you an insight on how the federal government is changing when it comes to federal workers. The first question he was asked was about the hiring freeze. How will hiring look after the hiring freeze? And we have to go ahead and focus real quick on the hiring freeze because it's been going on for a long time. It's the longest in government history. There hasn't been one this long as of yet. So the deal with that is it's supposed to be lifted October 16th. So October 15th is the last day of the hiring freeze. October 16th is supposed to be lifted. A lot of agencies will be able to hire once again. But there are a lot of skeptics on that. They think that this hiring freeze will go until the end of the calendar year. There's some people that think it'll go over a year, 2 years, maybe the entire length of the Trump administration, potentially. I am of the belief that it should be ending in October. Now, this is if we don't have a government shutdown, because at the time of this recording, that question hasn't been answered. Now, I went over to usajobs.gov just to get an indication, to see what was going on, to put my fingers on the pulse of the federal jobs right now. Are they filling them? And I saw maybe a little bit over 3,000 jobs, which is incredibly low. It's like 50 or 60% lower than what we saw last month in August. So I do think, as long as we don't have a shutdown in October, we should see a strong rebound. Now, Scott is saying that they're focusing, talking about hiring in the federal government, they're focusing on the president's initiatives. So you know what that means. Two main things: law enforcement officers and public safety. So you got your Border Patrol agents, they're trying to ramp that up. You have your correction workers, they're trying to ramp that up as well. And then there's police officers. The key indicator is, where do you see the hiring events unfolding? And you see them in the Bureau of Prisons. You also see them in the Department of Homeland Security under CBP, ICE, and Border Patrol. So where you see the hiring events, that's where the initiative, that's where the focus will be at. So Scott goes on and he talks about performance management, because that's been an issue. We've been hearing about it time and time again. Basically, nobody gets low ratings in the federal government. So ones and twos, one is essentially you failed. You failed to meet expectations, and two is below expectations. Less than 0.5% of all federal employees receive a 1 or a 2. They want to increase that. They want to identify poor performers. So what you would normally see in a population like the federal workforce, you would see 10% getting 1s and 2s. So you're going to see a lot more people that didn't know they were poor performers, and all of a sudden they're going to realize, uh-oh, I'm a poor performer. I need to fix myself. Now, Scott and the Trump administration, they're both saying they want to identify poor performers so that they can coach them, so they can train them and redirect them. They're going to redirect them to the front door because they're going to get rid of them. They're going to kick them right outside of the agency. That's what I think. But they're saying that people shouldn't be afraid to receive poor ratings. And what they want to do to the high ratings, like the 5s, they want to give them more money. So we'll see if that actually happens. The next thing that they talk about during the interview is Schedule F. Now, you've heard of this. This is basically making federal employees that have policy as a core component of their job. They want to make those people easier to fire. Now, it's not essentially at will, but it's as close as you can get to at will. And it really takes away a lot of the civil service protections. And it just, tens of thousands of federal workers will be able to be dismissed without, very, very little paperwork. And if the Trump administration could have the ideal scenario, they would want every single federal employee to be Schedule F. They really would want everyone to be at will. Now, at this point of the interview, something really interesting happens, because the individual interviewing Scott, he is then going to reach into the audience and pull a comment from the audience and ask him something that a federal worker wants to know. And this question here is, could you discuss the additional cost of the return to office mandate? Now, this federal worker is speaking in the perspective of his agency. So it costs his agency $300 a month. because of the transit benefits. If you live in a metro area or even like a medium city, as a federal worker, you can apply for transit benefits. That could be a bus pass. That could be a metro, a train pass, something like that. And the limit right now is right around $300. So the agency pays that. That's paid from taxpayer dollars. So the agency is paying $300 to the federal worker so they can come into work. And then in this individual circumstance, the agency had to pay $750 to give this federal worker a workspace. So it's costing the agency over $1,000 to have that worker return to the office. And the answer that the head of OPM, Scotty, he basically says RTO, return to office, was not designed to be a cost-saving thing. That's how he phrases it. So he basically redirects and says, most federal workers were not in the office at the start of 2025, and that's a problem. Now, I'm going to quote him here. He says, in order to actually do the work of the American people, people need to be able to collaborate, talk to one another. Talk to one another. That's why we have Microsoft Teams. That's why technology has advanced to the point where we can communicate and actually show our face on the camera. So you can collaborate, you can talk, you can accomplish the mission at the house. There's no other way that you can defend RTO. You can't say, well, I want people to talk to one another. You could do that while you're teleworking or remote working. I want them to collaborate. Collaboration happens. You don't have to be within coughing distance of another person. You don't have to reach out and touch someone in the face in order to collaborate. You can still collaborate. That's what he said. Now, this leads into another question. Essentially, the next question is, tell me about the tech hiring initiative that you mentioned earlier. So Scott says that they have an early career problem. And this has been going on for quite a while. Basically, anyone that's under 30 years old, they're not working in the federal government. Only 7% of the federal workforce are under the age of 30 years old. And that's a problem. Scott says it's a problem because these people, the current workforce is going to retire and there's not going to be anybody there. So then the follow-on question was, is something turning them off or do they just not know? This is talking about younger people. Do they not know of the opportunity of becoming a federal worker? And Scott says, I think they just don't know. We have completely fumbled on telling people the right message about why government is exciting. What? What, Scott? They got the message. Maybe it's not the message you wanted them to get, but they got the message. The message is they're not wanted. That's why they're not applying. They're not wanted. The federal workforce looks the most unstable that it probably has looked in decades. You're trying to reduce pay. You're trying to reduce benefits. You're pulling union rights. You got the return to office mandate. You just talked on it. You just spoke on the return to office mandate. Do you think tech talent, the young individuals coming out of university today that are specialized in artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, that have the skills, they want to come in to a musty old federal building and sit in a cubicle farm? Is that what you think, Scott? Come on, Scott. You know better than that. They want the perks. They want the benefits that they're going to get in any other private company that's competing for that level of talent, which includes working from home. It doesn't have to be 100%. It doesn't have to be. It could be 1, 2, 3 days a week. Whatever it is, it has to be something or you're never going to get them. So there's this whole initiative, and Scott goes on to say that it's a problem. We have a tech problem. The federal government, the federal workforce has a tech problem, and AI is going to continue to get very important. And there's a massive shortage of people who understand the technology. You will not get those people if you continue to be hostile to federal workers. So here's the deal. I don't care where you're at in the political spectrum, whether you lean left or far right, far right. We can all agree that we need some semblance of a government, whether it's tiny, huge, massive, medium, I don't care. There's some functions that only the government can do. When talking about collecting tax revenue, only the government can do that. You can't privatize that. When it comes to air traffic controllers, when it comes to fixing the highways, when it comes to, giving out Social Security disability payments or Social Security payments to your grandparents or maybe even your great grandparents if you're lucky enough. But you need federal workers. You need some capacity of them. So, and here, if you're far right, like if you're really far right, you want to protect the borders, right? You want to protect the borders. and you want law and order like a lot. Like you want the FBI agents out there kicking down doors. So if you want a well-armed federal workforce, wouldn't you want the best and brightest? Don't you want the top of the line, top of the crop? If you want that, then you should make the federal workforce a more attractive place to work. Even if you want to shrink it, if you want to downsize it, you should still try to make it the most attractive place, that you can work, because it's an important job. And if you lower the standards, you make it toxic, and you actively discourage people out, no, you're not going to get high quality people. I mean, you realize that, right? You're not going to get high quality people. Scott, you got it, right? Okay, in addition to that, you probably heard of the new 4 essay requirement when you're applying to a government job. Now, some people say it's not a requirement, but in other cases, as you're filling out a questionnaire to apply for a federal job, it will not allow you to go to the next window until you actually put something in there. Some people put NA, non-applicable, but most people who are serious about trying to get a federal government job, they're going to try to fill out those essay questions. So if you want to know the best way to do that, a good strategy to knock that out, to complete that, then I want you to check this video out next. Stay updated by signing up to the free newsletter down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.